there is a truth that many people do not want to accept. The world does not reward people who insist on being exactly the same in every situation. The world rewards people who can read the room, understand human nature, and adjust the way they communicate depending on the environment. At first, that sounds fake. But think about it carefully. You do not speak to your mother the same way you speak to your closest friend. You do not walk into a job interview with the same energy you bring to a party. You do not use the same tone with a child that you use with a CEO. You have already been changing versions of yourself every single day. You just never saw it as a strategic skill. This is the second lesson of social intelligence. Adaptive persona. The ability to adjust the way you present yourself depending on the person and the situation. Not to deceive, not to manipulate, not to become a fake person with no identity, but to communicate more effectively in a world where every human being experiences reality through a different lens. Immature people think communication is simply saying what they think. Mature people understand that communication is making sure what they say can actually be received by the other person. That is the difference. There are highly intelligent people nobody enjoys working with. There are talented people who are constantly misunderstood. There are kind people who somehow make others uncomfortable every time they speak. Why? Because they only know how to communicate in their own language. They never learned how to adjust to the person in front of them. They assume that if others do not understand them, then the problem must be everyone else. But truly socially intelligent people ask a different question. What does this person need to hear in order to truly receive my message? That is not weakness. That is power. Imagine trying to explain one idea to 4 different people. The first person is deeply logical. They do not care much about emotion. They want structure, evidence, and facts. The second person is emotional. They care about how the idea makes people feel. The third person is practical. They only care about one thing: does it work? The fourth person is visionary. They want meaning, possibility, and the bigger picture. If you use the exact same communication style with all 4 people, at least 3 of them will disconnect from you. But if you understand human psychology, you can adjust the way you deliver the message without changing the essence of the message itself. With logical people, you speak through evidence. With emotional people, you speak through feeling. With practical people, you speak through results. With visionary people, you speak through purpose. The message remains the same. Only the doorway changes. That is adaptive persona. Many people fear this concept because they think, if I change depending on the person, then am I still being myself? The answer is yes. You are not changing your core values. You are changing the packaging. Emotionally intelligent people are not wearing masks all day long. They simply understand that every environment has its own language. Look at highly successful people in society. A great leader may be extremely firm inside a boardroom but gentle with their children at home. A skilled doctor may be precise and analytical with colleagues but soft and reassuring with a frightened patient. A successful entrepreneur may speak strategically with investors and then laugh casually with employees minutes later. That is not fake. That is adaptability without losing identity. Meanwhile, many people fail because they bring the wrong version of themselves into the wrong environment. They bring ego into professional meetings. They bring competitiveness into love. They use commanding energy with people who need empathy. They use cold logic with people who are emotionally wounded. Then they wonder why everything falls apart. Not because they are bad people, but because they do not understand people. This is important. Human beings do not respond to your intentions. They respond to how you make them feel. You may be completely right, but if your delivery makes people feel disrespected, they will resist you. You may have good intentions, but if your energy feels overwhelming, people will pull away. You may be sincere, but if you cannot communicate effectively, your sincerity becomes useless. Mature people understand that communication is not only about content. It is also about timing, rhythm, energy, tone, eye contact, and emotional atmosphere. Some people decide whether they trust you simply by the way you speak. That is why the ability to read the room is so powerful. When socially intelligent people enter a room, they do not immediately try to express themselves first. They observe. Who is controlling the energy? Who wants attention? Who feels insecure? Who is defensive? Who is trying to dominate? They observe before they act. While many people walk into a space desperately trying to be noticed, socially intelligent people adapt themselves to the emotional structure of the environment. Not to lose themselves, but to move more effectively inside it. Think about water. Water can move gently around stone. Yet over time, water shapes the stone itself. It is flexible, but not weak. Adaptive persona works the same way. Rigid people often believe rigidity equals strength. But in reality, people who cannot adapt are usually the easiest to break. If you only know how to communicate in one way, you will lose connection with many different kinds of people. If you only react according to your natural impulses, you will create unnecessary conflict everywhere you go. If you cannot regulate your emotional energy depending on the situation, you become a prisoner of your own personality. There is a reason why influential people make many different kinds of individuals feel comfortable around them. They know how to adjust their communication frequency. With introverts, they become calmer. With confident people, they become stronger. With wounded people, they become more patient. With logical people, they become clearer. This does not mean they are acting. It simply means they understand that if you want to connect with people, you must learn the emotional language they speak. And this is where many people misunderstand the concept completely. Adaptive persona is not abandoning yourself to please others. If you change your morals, values, or principles simply to gain acceptance, that is not social intelligence. That is lack of identity. A truly adaptive person still keeps their inner core intact. They only adjust the presentation. Like a song played through different instruments. The melody remains the same. Only the expression changes. You do not need to become someone else. You only need to understand which version of your strength should appear in each moment. Sometimes the strongest version is firm. Sometimes it is silent. Sometimes it is playful. Sometimes it is serious. Sometimes it leads. Sometimes it listens. Intelligent people know when to shift. Interestingly, emotionally mature people are rarely trapped inside one fixed self-image. They do not need to always look powerful. They do not need to always win. They do not need to always dominate the room. They are flexible. They can walk into a room full of power and remain confident. But they can also sit beside a hurting person and become fully present. They do not let ego limit their ability to connect. Meanwhile, many people become prisoners of the image they constantly try to maintain. They think, I must always appear strong. I must always appear mysterious. I must always appear funny. I must always stay in control. And because of that, they lose the ability to become fully human in different situations. Adaptive persona requires deep self-awareness. You must understand yourself before you can adapt without losing yourself. Otherwise, you are not adapting. You are dissolving. There is a massive difference between flexibility and lack of identity. Flexible people choose how they express themselves. People without identity change themselves to gain approval. Flexible people keep principles. People without identity say whatever gains acceptance. Flexible people adjust energy without selling their values. That distinction matters. One of the clearest signs of intelligence is the ability to make many different types of people feel understood. Not because you pretend to be them, but because you know how to meet them where they are emotionally. If someone is afraid, you do not begin with logic. You begin with safety. If someone is overwhelmed emotionally, you do not attack them with facts. You help them stabilize first. If someone feels defensive, forcing them to change immediately will only create stronger resistance. Emotionally intelligent people understand that humans do not open up when they feel pressured. They open up when they feel understood. That is why great communicators are rarely the loudest people in the room. They are the people who make others feel most comfortable. They create the right emotional space for different personalities. They are not obsessed with winning every conversation. They are focused on building connection. This becomes extremely important in professional life. Many talented people remain stuck because they believe skill alone is enough. But the world runs on people. And people run on emotion, perception, and experience. If you cannot adjust yourself in different environments, you will constantly create unnecessary friction. Someone with strong social intelligence can walk into a tense meeting and calm the entire atmosphere. They can sense when to speak and when to stay silent. They can recognize who needs validation, who needs attention, who feels threatened, and who simply wants to be heard. They understand that sometimes the most important thing is not saying the smartest thing. It is saying the right thing in the right way. That is an art. The same principle applies to relationships. Many relationships fail not because love is absent, but because two people speak different emotional languages. One person wants solutions. The other wants understanding. One person needs space. The other needs closeness. One person processes stress through silence. The other processes it through conversation. If both people force the other person to communicate exactly the same way they do, conflict never ends. Adaptive persona in love means understanding. What does this person need in order to feel safe, loved, and emotionally understood? You do not always need agreement. But you do need connection. And that requires emotional maturity. Because the natural instinct of human beings is to assume their own perspective is correct. But truly intelligent people understand that every person carries a different nervous system, different experiences, different wounds, and a different interpretation of reality. And if you want influence, you must first enter their reality before trying to pull them into yours. That is the real power of adaptive persona. Not manipulation, but connection without destroying differences. Flexibility without losing identity. The ability to walk through many different worlds while remaining rooted inside yourself. And in the end, this is what you must remember. Weak people change themselves to gain approval. Intelligent people change their expression to create connection. Dangerous people know how to adapt while still protecting their values. Adaptive persona is not becoming someone else. It is understanding that every environment requires a different expression of the strength already inside you. Sometimes strength is silence. Sometimes strength is softness. Sometimes strength is decisiveness. Sometimes strength is the ability to listen. And true maturity is knowing which version of yourself the moment requires. Because in this world, people who constantly try to prove who they are often create conflict everywhere they go. But people who understand human nature, understand emotional environments, and know how to adjust their energy, usually become the most influential people in the room. Not because they are fake, but because they are wise enough to understand that communication is not forcing people into your world. It is building a bridge where both worlds can meet in the middle.